Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the final day of Fintech Tour 20, the largest cluster of Fintech events happening in the Middle East. My name is Sagar Shah and I'm part of the Fintech Saudi team. And we're really pleased to have you joining us for this lunchtime session with Sam Kokaran. Sam is the co-founder of Cander, and he was previously the talent acquisition consultant for the Central Bank of the UAE. He's got a huge amount of experience in talent strategies, in recruiting. And so we are thrilled to have him here today to do a workshop on how fintechs develop a talent strategy, how can individuals market themselves to fintechs. Thank you everyone for joining again. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. We'll also be taking Q&As at the end, so feel free to add any questions that you have, and we'll try to get through as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd love to hand it over to Sam. Sam, the floor is yours for the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Sagar, and good afternoon to everyone within the Fintech Saudi ecosystem. Give me 1 second, just sharing the screen. Obviously, like to start by thanking Munira, Sagar, and the Fintech Saudi team for giving us the opportunity to speak again, following on from our talk earlier in the year. I'm going to be talking about how fintechs can develop their talent strategy and also touching lightly on how candidates can market themselves to fintechs. Obviously, be happy to answer Q&A, answer the Q&A at the end of the session, but feel free to drop questions through out the presentation. If you could just denote whether you're in a fintech or whether you're a candidate with your question, that would be helpful. So wait there 1 second. Yes, okay. So just to introduce myself, my name is Sam Corcoran. I'm a co-founder of Cander. We're a 4.5-year-old startup recruitment executive search business focused across the GCC. We specialise in fintech and have been on that journey for 4 years, as well as working within the financial services space, digital technology, and the advisory scene around the fintech world. I've been doing some kind of technology into banking recruitment for about 21 years. My business partner and myself have gone through 4 startup situations and completed 1 successful exit. I've been in region for 11 years and as Saga said, managed some on-site projects, including working at the central bank here in the UAE and also being heavily involved in the first stage of critical hiring for the UAE's first challenger bank that's just about to be centrally bank licensed here. For those of you that joined our talk a couple of months ago, you'll probably recognise a few of the slides, but if we look at building a talent strategy from a very high level, it's good to understand that you're going to go through probably 3 very distinct phases initially in your first 2 to 3 years of building your fintech. That's on a high level, the build, run, and grow stages. Obviously, the build is all around the ideation and strategy, the product, people, and platform design, going through that licensing, funding process, and then getting yourself to some kind of operational build and readiness stage, ready for getting licensed, and then executing the run and launch stage strategy, taking it through to the production environment. And then getting to hopefully that post Series A, B, C, high growth expansion stage. And you know, the one headline to note here is that they are 3 quite different stages. You probably need 3 different types of people, or at least have some idea that in your initial stages you're hiring the kind of people that can get you through those 3 stages, or not maybe. The simple steps to creating a talent strategy are as follows. It's pretty obvious to say that aligning your talent strategy with the business strategy is fairly key. It seems obvious, but we quite often see, you know, organizations cracking on with their platform and their technology build, and they let the human element grow quite, you know, organically. But really it's something that should be thought about at the very earliest stages, along with the tech and the platform side. We talked about it a lot last time in terms of designing your culture and employee brand early. This sets the tone of what your value proposition as an organization is going to be about. It helps with hiring the right people from the start, that have the right spirit that your business is going to be based upon. And thirdly, having a very clear design, even if it's at a very high level, but it quite often gets forgotten to have a design around the organizational structure. Identifying critical roles and investing in them. This sometimes is taken as those kind of first initial senior hires or the executive layer, but really you should be thinking about what are actually critical hires, whether that's a developer through to someone creating your data strategy. It's not always your leadership, but whoever those critical roles are, spending a little bit more money and investing in those hires is key to getting a good ripple effect with your overall hiring later on. Ensuring that you've designed that success criteria for hiring, and also extending that to the performance criteria against those hires once they've been taken on board, but communicating that down through your business so that everyone knows what a good hire is for your business is absolutely critical. And then also making some early decisions around whether you buy or build or outsource elements of your organization. So to expand upon that, aligning your business strategy with the talent strategy, as I said, it seems like an obvious point to make, but it does get forgotten. And effective talent strategies lie in the alignment of taking that CEO or that founder's business strategy and supporting it with strong HR capability, and communicating the talent strategy through all levels of the business. It's something that we see time and time again, for being forgotten. People get their ideas, they run to market very quickly in terms of that platform and tech side and product build, and sometimes let the people side, grow organically. We also see that, quite often the HR capability is seen as an administrative function and not a people function. And building that strong HR capability to support the CEO or founder's vision is absolutely critical and key. And then deciding on what you're going to base your strategy on. Obviously, most of you are going to be building some kind of digitized or digital business. Deciding on what elements are going to be go through that digitization piece, what elements are going to be optimized through technology. Are pretty key in terms of building out your strategy and how many people you're going to need and how many in what areas for how long. And then, a big element is the differentiator between successful fintechs and that traditional financial services space. I think we all know that whoever gets the customer experience right is going to win. We've had some protected markets within the GCC for a long time, and banks have had a fairly monopolized market, and you guys are coming in to disrupt, and you're going to do that through the customer experience, and obviously making sure that the kind of hires you make are extremely customer centric is obviously a big part of that talent strategy. We're seeing that most people that want to join your kind of organizations are also looking for a constant innovation agenda, and that ability to influence disruption. So that needs thinking about, and then also looking at whether you're going to grow organically or you're going to get your people growth through acquisition at certain stages, obviously needs thinking about too. And as a final point, what your organization might look like when you start off might evolve. It's very likely to evolve. It might pivot, and obviously you need to be constantly recalibrating your talent strategy. And changing what that looks like as your product and your ideas about your business evolve through your growth journey. Circling back to these three phases of your fintech life cycle, we said it before in the previous session that looking at least a 2 to 3 year plan around your talent strategy, breaking that deal down into the build, run, and growth stages, and looking at the different mindsets that you're going to need along the way are really important. I'll keep mentioning it throughout this presentation, but one of the upsides of COVID and obviously the new kind of working from home phenomenon is it gives you guys a far greater ability to come up with a flexible talent strategy. So we never really had a contract and freelancer market, particularly in this region. We're certainly starting to see a number of our fintechs and digital clients looking at whether they're going to hire permanent people, looking at the contract market, as well as obviously looking at that outsource route. Obviously thinking about how you tap into consultancies and non-exec advisors is important. In terms of getting that organizational design, it would probably cost you anything from $250,000 to $500,000 if you were using a strategy consultancy. And so most people don't do it, but looking at some kind of support around that, it's difficult and it needs expertise around it. And trying to work out how you get third-party support around it it would be very, very valuable from the journeys that we've seen. Technology is always going to be your hardest hiring point. Most fintechs that we work with tend to go with some kind of outsourced function, but there's always a point of maturity where they always feel out of control around their technology and want to bring it inside, and tech hiring is absolutely the hardest hiring that any founder will have to go through unless he's actually a technology expert themselves. And then coupling that with a very strong culture and employee brand design is pretty critical from day one, and we see this as an area that will ultimately save you money. Getting your values articulated after that design period, getting your stock incentives well thought out from day one, and being very transparent about what the journey plan is for any prospective hire will ensure that A, you get your hiring right, but B, you will ultimately save money in the end. And for everyone, mitigating your burn rate all the time is vitally important in the early stages as you're on that journey to getting your Series A. From our experience of working with a number of businesses, whether they were fairly small, founder-led, personally invested, through to highly and substantially funded vehicles, there's some key hires that can help you with your organizational design. We find that most founders obviously have great passion, drive, commitment to their businesses. They're normally very focused on that platform and product build, but they need to be considering this people design, very, very early stages. And I think, founders need to be honest with themselves about what they're good at and realize that they can't be, de facto head of everything. And there's some critical roles that we always see as hires that you should get in as early as you can, but can also help navigate you through this early stage and this design stage. One of those is obviously if you're not a techie, getting a CTO or a technical advisor to help you design your technical team or navigate you through bringing your outsourced technology in-house at some point is absolutely critical. We can call this a number of things: chief strategy officer or chief of staff or just the glue. The startups that I've been through, there's always been someone that can articulate, structure the CEO or the founder's ideas through to a far more structured model. And you can get some really early stage strategy guys that don't want to go on the partner route in the McKinseys of the world, that are looking to get into industry at early stages, that can add huge value around your project and program management, your organisational designs, your communication plans, your market entry strategies, your pivots, and we see that as a really key hire. We tend to find that founders sometimes feel they can't afford these roles at an early stage, but we always say you can't afford not to, and it will save you money in the long run. Getting a decent CFO in the early stages and managing your burn rate and managing your P&L properly is always an obvious one. And as I mentioned before, getting a chief people officer to drive your people strategy. And I say people because HR is feeling a bit of an administration and an old-fashioned term now. Any people officer should be able to understand the HR implications, but really it's about driving your people strategy, and getting a great one is extremely important in terms of the success of your organisations. We know that it doesn't matter how digitized you can make your business, the people part is always going to be the hardest element of your business being successful. When we talk about culture, really that's about defining the thoughts and emotions and the shared values that sit underneath your business, and driving behaviors when no one is looking. You've got a successful business when you're not in the room and the business operates in the same way and drives towards the same outcomes that you desire as a founder. Having a strong culture is definitely a competitive advantage, but also can be a huge disadvantage if you don't get it right. And one thing that we're seeing, and my business partner and co-founder sat on a panel at Gitex yesterday, everyone talked about how they continue to build and maintain sustained culture in what's going to be a new hybrid model of working both on site in your HQs and obviously working from home. And that's going to be a massive challenge. And it's even more challenging when you're in startup mode and you're trying to build that initial culture of the business. So areas obviously to consider to make sure that talent becomes a bit of a magnet for acquiring talent. Obviously getting that employer brand right in the initial stages, help using that to attract the right talent in your initial conversations, and then putting a decent process in place to make sure you're hiring the right talent. That makes retaining talent in the end easier. If you get the hiring right in the first place, you've got your shared values and your employer brand correct, retaining talent becomes an easier process. And then coupling that with a solid rewards and compensation structure are all the areas that you should be considering whilst building your talent strategy. Culture starts and ends with values. And I think as we move towards more millennials and Gen Zs coming into the workplace, they're looking for the ethics behind the business, the values that the founders have, the purpose of the business, and that isn't always a commercial one. So, be aware that, candidates will be choosing to join you, and there will be competition around that. And having a clear set of values defined from the beginning is, it's very important to these guys. We see it underestimated a lot by employers. They sometimes throw the words up on the wall, but don't actually live and breathe it as an organisation, and it takes a huge amount of effort. So, make sure that your values are in line with your purpose. So, define the why and the purpose. Work on your way of doing business, the ethics, the pace of work, the quality expected of your product, services, and external interactions, your social responsibility, respect for clients, employees, and the communities that you're operating in, and make sure that your leadership team truly lives and breathes these values that you're declaring as a business. As I said yesterday, my co-founder Luke sat on a panel here, and everyone talked about what the post kind of COVID culture is going to look like. We don't believe working from home is going to be the ultimate trend. We believe it's going to be a hybrid model, but working remotely is going to be there now for the long term. Everyone's got used to doing it. They've seen the benefits of it. Lots of people like it. It's certainly better for families and for driving the diversity agenda for sure. Tech talent, which is always going to be your hardest hiring piece of the jigsaw, they're used to doing it and have been doing it for the last 10 to 15 years anyway, but they're going to start to demand it as part of the package. So you need to think about that as part of your model. One thing that COVID did was throw us into this in region. Most businesses were very physical businesses. Everyone now needs to think about what are the rules, how do you work from home? How do you work from home safely? Are you allowed to work anywhere? Is the business comfortable with you working in a cafe rather than home? Can they work abroad? Do they get the same salaries? How's your executive team going to manage people within that structure? Are they trained in it? Tech's always had an offshoring element or a remote element. So tech leadership sometimes can be better trained in this, but the rest of the business probably hasn't been. So it's something that you need to think about. We've seen recently Microsoft make a statement that they're wholeheartedly driving the management of their business through outcomes. It's not going to be time-based in the future. It's going to be about deliverables and outcomes, and that needs a different management style, especially if people are working from home. You need even clearer communication of your brand values to remote teams, and we've noticed this from our time. Making sure you recognise success, celebrating the wins. And building initial culture when you're bringing new people in is really tough. We found it so hard personally as a business. The infrastructure side and being able to work from home was a doddle. We've built everything in the cloud, and I'm sure most of your organisations will be doing that too. But so the infrastructure wasn't a problem, but bringing in the new rules of how we do it going forward is going to be quite a challenge. And the panel yesterday brought that up numerous times. By 2025, most of your workforce is going to be millennials, and then obviously moving into the Gen Z side. It's going to be the world's first kind of global generation. They're all going to be extremely tech savvy. Their drivers for joining your business are going to be quite different. They're going to be running every aspect of our life outside of the workplace as well, and driving the outside culture. So your talent strategies have got to cater for both the local and your remote future leaders that are going to come from very, very diverse backgrounds and probably going to be sitting somewhere else in the world too, with a whole different group of drivers as to why they're joining the workforce. I won't go through this in a huge depth because obviously this will be passed on, but obviously the millennials, the headlines are that they want a better work-life balance, they want a constant stream of innovation, they want to disrupt, they want flexibility. And then if we take that and extend it into the Gen Z population, they want to extend that to working in very diverse environments, but still and nurturing their individuality, communicating through all the channels, not just face-to-face, and again, having huge amounts of flexibility. And across both, it brings me back to this need to manage by outcomes and deliverables. It's going to be the way we're all going to have to work in the future, but it needs a different management style around it. I'll stop at this stage just to mention how candidates should be marketing themselves to Fintechs, because it ties in. And my understanding is we've got a lot of graduates and potential graduates on the call. In terms of marketing yourself to Fintechs, hiring for these guys is all about attitude over skills. The degrees that you're doing generally will get you the interview, but kind of stop at the door unless you've done a very technical data science or digital marketing or or a computer science degree. Moving into fintech is all about your attitude. We've noticed a number of the fintechs we work with where they've hired directly. It's been really interesting to see who they've hired against who we would generally send as an agency, and they've definitely hired on the mindset really. So you've got to show that learning mindset, your ability to solve problems. Show some hunger and passion that matches the founders that you'll be joining and the teams that you'll be joining. Putting a lot of preparation in, not being entitled to the interview, but actually really preparing, understanding the vision of the business, doing your research around it, and then understanding the startup culture. Joining any digital or fintech business is like doing a mini MBA. It's a great learning experience, but they're quite often not very structured. And you need to understand that you're going to have to wear a lot of hats. And so when you're marketing yourself to fintechs, you've got to promote that. So, beyond the CV side, you need to show that ability to be extremely flexible. On the CV side, get creative. You're trying to join the digital economy. There's lots of different platforms now other than the boring paper-based CVs, and you will get judged on your creativity around that. You haven't got lots of experience to show, so think about your achievements, those external achievements, the groups that you've belonged to, the challenges that you've overcome whilst doing your degrees. And then when you're making that decision of who you join, focus on learning and development and the industry exposure and the journey that you're going to go through. It's not a money conversation at this stage. You'll earn that later on if you get great exposure in your first couple of organisations that you join. So, think about that later on. See it as a personal investment in the businesses that you're joining. In terms of the most demand jobs in fintech at the moment that we're seeing, I'd have said probably 60 to 70, maybe even 80% are in the technology space. So blockchain experts and developers, application developers across mobile and the internet through to the cloud side, data scientists, DevOps engineers, and then cybersecurity are really the real hot in-demand jobs at the moment. And then couple that with the risk and compliance experts needed to get through the licensing process, the financial and modelling analysts around to feed into then the product owners. They're all the key hires. And I think my point on that is we've got some gaps in region. We have the ability to obviously hire from anywhere in the world at the moment. But we also need to hire locally, and we've obviously got some countries within the GCC that have got high nationalisation agendas, and we're going to have to take some responsibility because a lot of those jobs that I mentioned on the previous slide, there isn't that capability within market at the moment. So we're going to have to help build the process. Help build that expertise along the way. So we're not seeing many internships being driven by fintechs at the moment, and it's an area where you can get some great resources, some very passionate resources, and ultimately when the finances in the early stages are key, and managing that burn rate, giving someone the opportunity whilst also getting some resources is you can get that from building some great internship schemes. But you need to also put some frameworks in place around that, because successful internships require a lot of effort from both the side of the interns, but also the managers and hiring businesses. So make sure that you develop a clearly defined job description. Make sure that you're managing performance against that job description. Keep your interns busy. There's nothing worse than sitting there and having nothing to do. So, make sure that you're defining those projects before they come in. partner them up with a mentor within the organisation that they can go to and get advice from, build them into the social structure that you have in the business. EQ is going to win over IQ in the future. I've always found that grads weren't particularly work ready whenever I've hired them, and we've had to spend a lot of time socialising them within the workspace. The more that you can do within the intern programs to get them work ready, the better. Show appreciation for the work that they do. They're not there just as free resource. They're hopefully delivering some value, so show some recognition for that. And provide lots of opportunities for them to ask questions and learn. It's vitally important that they go back to their degree courses and understand what the real value is of their degree when they get into the marketplace, because a lot of these degrees are extremely theoretical and they don't always keep pace with the changing work environment. So it's important that they go back and start driving their specialisms and what they're learning within their degree courses. Hiring is easy, but hiring correctly, hiring right is an absolute skill. Steve Jobs said the first 10 people you hire can make or break your business. And we've got to bring some new hiring dilemmas into the equation in the future. So do you rely on artificial intelligence or classic interview processes? I.e. interviews face-to-face, online, systemizing it? Do you go on gut feel or do you apply science? What are you looking for? Is it IQ, EQ, experience? And looking at future potential or past performance. I see everyone that seems to be on site at a bank, a traditional bank or insurance house, seems to be called a talent acquisition specialist, but I see most organisations hiring on experience and past experience. No one's really tapping into future capability or tapping into that EQ side, and that's vitally important for fintechs, where someone's going to have to wear 5 hats in their first 3 years. It doesn't necessarily matter about their experience if they can't adapt quickly and change. So that also means, in terms of hiring the right people, you're going to have to build in processes that can support your future needs. The general hiring challenges at the moment, everyone still finds that it's a challenge to hire. There seems to be a misperception in market at the moment that because of COVID and the general, economy, that it's a buyer's market. That might be for old traditional roles. It might be for day-to-day operational roles, but we're seeing that the market for digital and tech talent is still extremely strong. And this week, we're as busy as we were in Q1 and at the end of last year. And it's all the jobs that you're going to need. So we're starting to see candidates having multiple offers again, which makes hiring into a startup, very challenging. 6 out of 10 senior technical professionals said the biggest challenge they have is hiring talent still. And that's even worse for tech startups, where 71% said it was their biggest challenge in terms of scaling. A lot of that is based around the salary challenge, and 45% reported not being able to match established organisations as being the main issue. And then I think if we had the layer of, hiring into the GCC is not always the easiest for the kind of sexy hiring areas. But there's ways to make that easier. Obviously, if you had a magic wand and you could just pay more, then higher salaries would work. But I think it's a small element of this. COVID and the whole remote working phenomenon and the flexibility that can bring, that changes the landscape dramatically. Most of the traditional businesses are not going to be up to speed around remote working and flexible working for at least 12 to 18 months to even 2 years. You have an ability to be very agile about that very quickly and be extremely flexible and offer potential candidates a different work-life environment. I mentioned it before, getting your share options defined at the beginning is very important. We're seeing in London and Singapore and those more mature fintech markets where it's pretty standard that these share schemes are articulated from literally day one. that you can see at least a 20 to 30% saving within that first 12 to 18 months on how much you need to pay people, and getting them bought into the wealth creation path of what it looks like in 3 to 5 years time and what an uplift they can get if it's successful. If you build decent share and compensation packages, you'll leap ahead, because we're not seeing any of that being brought into the traditional financial services marketplace. And then again, making sure that you have a clear vision, that you can articulate the journey that people that can go on. That's key in getting people bought into something that's going to be way more exciting than the traditional employment space. And then looking at, in terms of your hiring, how much and how often you're going to need people. We've had a very permanent marketplace in terms of the employment world here, due to the kind of visa sponsorship. We're starting to see the contract and freelancer marketplace being utilised, and obviously you have this global capability now and people can work from home. So stop thinking permanent, think about when you can actually get a true expertise in for a shorter period of time that has less of an investment cycle needed to their hire. Although it might be expensive on the face of it, they might actually be cheaper in the long run. And also you can use them to build your capability of your existing and permanent staff. COVID, as we've said, has brought forward the working remote working trend. So have a think about whether you need people locally. Can you go to cheaper markets and get great expertise? It's definitely worth looking at. But our biggest statement is always get the best that you can afford. In studies, the best teams outperform the weakest by a ratio of 10 to 1. But also think about the ripple effect that great people have. So when you look at those critical hires that you've got in your first 12-month plan, spending a bit more on the critical hires and maybe not spending so much on the more operational hires, that will help you hire better people in the future. That word spreads. It's a great story to go to market with, and it will drive performance of probably less experienced staff sitting around them. Obviously, when we go on site and we get involved in big initial hiring projects, there's various methods of engaging talent, which I just talked about. You've got that full-time direct hiring route in country, looking at it remotely, looking at the freelancer space, and then obviously looking at solutions providers. And you need to build all of that into your strategy at the start. There's various pros and cons to all of them. And there's various cost savings on either side. So obviously we'll forward this presentation on, but do have a think about that. And we always say to everyone that, look, engage agencies like us at the beginning to give you scale, to get you up to speed quicker, and to help you with those initial critical hires. But you should also be thinking about bringing in-house your recruitment capability. And certainly when you can't afford going down the agency route, looking at how you find them, there's various routes to doing that. Referrals are great in those initial stages. They're obviously free. It hopefully means that the culture fit is good. They're known entities to people in your organization. There is limited reach to that, or it becomes finite quite quickly. There's not always guarantees that they're great people, but you have to make sure that you define what is a good hire in your business, so that people don't just hire their friends on that side. That's a downside that we've seen. There's various job boards for the local market. They're relatively cheap, give you a bit of a wider reach. They can make your business very busy. Job advertisements, we don't tend to use them too much because we get so many responses, generally into the kind of 1,500 to 3,000 mark. That's a lot of noise and a lot of filtering that you have to do to find great people. Using LinkedIn is great and can help you be more targeted, but you do need training, and you do need experts that can use LinkedIn to get the best out of it. Social media and building your employer brand through social media is good. It again is cheap. It helps build the overall employer brand, but again, it's kind of unfiltered. It doesn't always help with the quality control and can be very untargeted. Internal HR, recruitment always kind of gets lumped with them whilst they're trying to build out all their internal HR policies. It's good from helping to drive that cultural consistency, but they're not always specialists, and it doesn't always give you capability across all of the hiring that you need to do. But it's something that you have to get in place within a 6 to 12 month period. And then using agencies, we're always going to promote that, but you know, using all channels to find your staff is obviously helpful, but using agencies at the right point is where that you can get value. Using them for specialist hires, using them for speed is where you should be utilising them, but obviously, you know, it can be expensive. Making sure that when you get into the hiring process, understanding what a drain on your time this can be is key, and making sure hiring is effective is really something you need to spend a lot of time on. Making sure that you're getting the right people interviewing and in what order, getting a very clear idea about what you're interviewing against, what's the criteria, and then obviously once you're hiring, making sure that criteria is then being driven through from interview stage through to performance management once people in the business, you know, that starts at the interview process. Utilising the tools that we have today around video, we're definitely seeing that using video interviewing is cutting down the first stage side and shortening the overall process. Which is really important, takes a huge amount of time. When I went on site at the digital bank I worked with last year, I personally did something like 180 interviews in the first 8 weeks. My team of 10 people did over 700. And then the digital bank themselves, you know, still had to do 100 interviews in that 8-week process to basically get 25 hires in. It was a huge amount of work sitting behind it, and if you aren't using any external people to do it, you know, you've got to manage that yourself. So making sure the interview process is concise, clear, and is valuable is important. Also, you know, how the experience is for the candidate is really important. This is where again you can win. You know, feedback levels to candidates by bigger businesses and bigger corporates is generally pretty poor. Their experience of hiring is generally quite disjointed, and you know, you guys can do a far better job of that and win, turn things around quickly, feedback well. Even if you decide not to take people on, they might be good for your organisation in 2 years' time, or they might drive other referrals to you. So, you know, don't think that if they're not right for the job, they shouldn't have a good experience. Everyone should have a good experience, and it's going to differentiate people when the markets pick up again. And then, you know, understanding the market and being realistic about it, and being realistic about what you can get is really important. You know, we quite often see fintechs coming to market where they're really needing to hire 45 to 50,000 K people a month, and you know, coming to market with budgets of 30. You then see great people that you can't afford, and then that colours the actual people that you can afford against your budgets later on. So, you know, being realistic about, you know, what the market it has and what you can get is also pretty important as part of that interview process. Just some key tips of working with agencies. You'll get the best result if you build a genuine relationship and partnership with them. You know, it's better to work with 1 or 2 very closely rather than kind of 10 transactional relationships. You'll get far more buy-in. You guarantee a bit of success to the agency, so you'll get more resource and more emphasis on your companies. And, you know, you're tough to hire for. So, you know, building relationships with 1 or 2 that really understand you is really important. Look right away for the track record. You know, in fintech particularly, you know, reference that. Make sure the agency can represent your brand, but also understands what you do and are specialists in hiring for that. We've got a huge amount of generic agencies in the region. They quite often have very good individual consultants that specialise, but don't necessarily as an organisation. And also look outside region into more mature markets, into the London and Singapore market. If you're going to work with agencies, there's agencies with way more experience and maturity than there are in the GCC region. Be honest and upfront as to where you're at on the journey and where you're trying to get to. The more information that we generally get as agencies, the better job that we do. And you know, it helps with selling your story and getting great people in front of you. So the more information that we can have, the more impact that you will get from any agency. And engage them at the moment when you're starting to become serious and you're starting to build out this talent strategy. You know, get advice on budgets, get advice on the reality of who's out there and in what markets talent is sitting in. So that you get your talent strategy right and utilize, you know, a wealth of experience that we've all had, that we've built up over a long period of time. So in terms of the hiring headlines, you know, hiring good talent is hard, but you guys have great stories to tell. Reevaluate your business plan constantly against the current market and what you can get out there and where you're going to get them from. Get the best talent that you can afford at all points, and utilize different methods of engagement to help you get access to that talent. Value your time in the process and make sure that you build your processes correctly, and make sure that interview and testing process to get people in is rigorous. The more that you can get right first time, obviously it makes hiring less expensive. Mistakes always cost twice as much, if not 3 times. That old adage of measure twice, cut once, you know, applies to hiring too. And you know, look at all aspects of that to make sure that you're hiring the right talent. In terms of if you need any further advice, there's my contact details. I pretty much focus on the fintech and financial services space. We also have a head of fintech who will be getting himself over to Saudi pretty constantly in the first quarter of next year, assuming we can all get back on a plane. And so there's his contact details as well. So that's it. Questions and answers, please, if you've got any.
Thank you, Sam, for this informative and valuable presentation. I think we have received some questions. First question, how to build a culture and create a relationship with the staff that are working remotely?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest challenge. As I mentioned, we've got a fairly young team, and we realized that they just weren't set up for working from home. You know, working from home has worked really well for, you know, families, particularly working mothers, and, you know, more experienced people that are already working in a deliverable, an accountability-based way. So, you know, we're definitely going to work towards a hybrid model, I think. I met the head of workplace strategy for one of the big global banks that are based here recently, and they're trying to work out how they incentivize people to come back to work. They're looking at how they change their environments to make them more friendly and nicer places to go to work. But you know, fintechs are building that from a greenfield place anyway. Their environments are generally way nicer, and they're already thinking about more interesting ways to engage their staff. But you know, we're working to a hybrid model. We're certainly, from a tech perspective, you're going to have remote teams. So you know, as soon as we can start getting on a plane, you should be thinking about getting your teams together quite regularly, getting your leadership teams together quite regularly, physically, looking at how you recognize achievement, simple things. We work with a private bank here. He made his team turn their videos on. He found it really hard to engage with people. We've noticed that a lot, that people leave their videos off. You know, making sure that people are work ready at the end. You know, all of these little things are important about building culture and engagement. Keeping the videos on if you've got half the team in the office and half at home, you know, keeping a kind of live communication route there is pretty important. But it's going to be a huge challenge and something that everyone needs to think about.
To be connected.
Yeah, be connected at all times.
From your experience, what are the key factors why an individual chooses to join a startup over an experienced or a big company?
Excitement about the journey is always huge. I think fintech shouldn't be scared when people say no to them, or you know, when they test people on whether a candidate is going to see out the journey. Never shy away from not taking people on. If they don't get you, they're not going to last. But you know, the key drivers about joining is the excitement of the journey, and going through building something. We see most people moving from big corporate or big consultancy to the smaller startups because they want to have more influence on the outcome, and also, you know, there's some wealth creation potential at the end of that 3 to 5 year journey that just can't be matched in a typical compensation culture of a corporate. So you know, they're the main drivers that we see. It's about actually having influence on delivering the outcome is huge, and the excitement about the journey of building something.
Agreed. Another question: if I'm an entrepreneur and want to find a co-founder, how do you suggest I go finding one?
Yeah, that's something that we're seeing more and more at the moment, especially if a founder isn't very strong on the technical side. Trying to find a technical co-founder is one of the things that we're seeing a lot of, or if it's a technical founder needing someone that is more commercial. You need to network like crazy. At the starting point, you need to put it out there that you know you need one, and you probably need to look a bit further afield than the local market. It's really tough to find them for sure. You know, we've introduced a number of advisory types in recent times to organisations. We don't do that from a paid perspective. We sort of see it as adding value to the ecosystem. So, you know, tap into recruiters' networks around it. We've seen a number of people that have come out of either exits or wealth creation moments that don't want to necessarily go straight back into their next journey, or don't want to go into a full-time job, that will be happy to give some advisory for a number of days a month. So, you know, join the various fintech groups and associations, network like crazy, talk to your old banking networks if you're coming from a banking space and setting up your own fintech. You know, there's people out there that will certainly at least give advice and act as a co-founder, even if financially they can't do it yet. And I think that's probably the starting point.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Ruwaida, for this question. She asked about how can you balance between salaries or options, especially at the start of hiring talents.
I think we talked about it in a few elements of the presentation, but key one is getting those values correct at the beginning. Getting your share structure and your stock plans is an absolute winner in region. Big corporations just don't do it at all. There are no share schemes in place that we see that are interesting. And then looking geographically further afield, tapping into the fact that, you know, if you're looking for good technology staff, you know, Eastern Europe is fantastic. obviously those traditional hubs of India and Pakistan have got some great talent, Malaysia, Indonesia, you know, spreading your wings a bit and not looking at it as a permanent hire onshore and bringing them into what is ultimately quite an expensive place to live. You know, maybe for the first 12 to 18 months, you bring people in remotely with the fact that they will eventually be more permanent and be based onshore. I think you've just got to be very flexible about how you onboard people into your business.
Thank you. We have one last question. What are some of the most innovative ways that you have seen companies recruit staff?
Most of the time in region at the moment, we're seeing people go the very traditional routes. You know, everyone is still very reliant on their own networks, the agencies that they know or have used for a long time, and really the internal referral schemes. I think people could be a lot more innovative about their referral schemes internally. You know, if you're going to have to pay an outside agency to hire for you, you're going to have to pay quite a big fee. Or if you put value to your own time as a founder trying to find people or hiring people to hire people, you know, all of that is very, very expensive. And using referrals as a way to, you know, build your business or trying to systemize that, I think is a way to do it. Making sure that you define what a good referral looks like in your business, and then incentivizing your staff to hire against it. We've seen it historically in the investment banking space for years. When investment banks have been trying to drive diversity, they've incentivized that to a higher level than non-diverse candidates. And it tends to work. If you incentivize your staff to hire great people and for them to market your business, to get people they don't know into the business, making it a part of the culture to hire, not just, you know, the HR department, you know, expanding upon that network of capable people within your business to utilize their, you know, their degree alumni networks, their previous businesses that they've worked at, the people that they've worked at that know people that are great. You know, it should be something that everyone in the business is doing, but most organizations don't tell their staff that it's part of their KPIs, and maybe building that into their quarterly and annual KPIs could be one way of tapping into it. But making sure that the referral line is good is key. I've worked with a number of organizations where they haven't defined that, and you know, hiring someone that's been in a traditional financial services organization for 15 to 25 years, I don't think that's a fintech hire. And quite often the referral line can drive that locally. So trying to get out of that local network is pretty important.
Thank you. I think we have 1 minute. Do you think recruitment will change post-COVID?
From a personal perspective, I think we always go further up the food chain in these sort of digitized environments. So, you know, I think we will be used in the more specialist cases. I think recruitment theoretically might become easier if companies embrace the working from home and the global ability to hire staff. So, you know, that could be a plus point from it. I think people are going to get more holistic and more spiritual about the kind of organizations that they want to join. We saw it in the last recession, post-2008. I was mainly working in the investment banking and hedge fund sector at the time. They really struggled to hire staff after 2008. I think COVID might have a similar effect. I think, you know, coupled with the millennial and the Gen Z numbers that are going to come into the industry naturally, I think also people are going to want to join businesses with a great value proposition and a really strong ethical stance. And I think the tech space, particularly businesses with really strong ethics and that are giving back and aren't basically becoming big tech evil, you know, that's going to be very important.
Agreed. I think time flies. Thank you, Sam, for your time, and thank you for all the attendees for joining us today. We need to close the session and see you at 7 with the last session of the Fintech tour.
Fantastic, and I wish everyone all the best for the end of the year and the new year and the festive period.
Thank you. Bye.